including what was read yesterday during the budget speech, if it doesn't get the right kind of leadership, then we are never ever going to see it coming to fruition. My name is Frederick Njiri, and I'll be your host this morning. And with me in the studio to take a look at some of the critical aspects of leadership, and mostly so within the church. You can remember, I think it was early this month, immediately after the Shakahola incident, the president set up a task force that was to look into why we are seeing the kind of things within the religious circle, and what needs to be done to ensure we don't ever experience this kind of thing. So we'll look at where we dropped the ball and how we can be able to pick it up again. Now I have Pastor Alan Kefa with me in the studio. Karibu, Pastor.
Asante, thanks for having me.
Pastor Alan is also a leadership expert. And the gentleman on my far right is not a stranger here, Pastor David Matthew, who's also a leadership expert. He's in business, in the corporate world, doing so many things out there, and so he comes into contact with so many things, just like Pastor Alan Kefa. But before we get into the regulating religion, maybe you're one of the people who couldn't sleep yesterday because the shock of the budget hit you so hard. What did you think about the whole thing?
I've not had time to interrogate the whole speech.
Yes.
But at the surface, there are certain things that have been, floated that raise a bit of, my eyebrows went up, because I'm thinking about the value-added tax on insurance, and I'm asking myself, why would you tax someone for insurance? Because insurance covers so many things. It covers health, it covers death, it covers all those things. So that does it mean then that if somebody passes and they receive health insurance, they'll be taxed for dying? Or if somebody is unwell, they go to hospital, they'll be taxed for falling sick. Insurance goes by the principle of indemnity, and if I insure my car, it is because I want to ensure that if I put in 100,000 in the event, or 50,000 or 20,000, whatever the case, in the event that there is an accident or I need to indemnify or I need to repair my car, I'm able to. So when you tax that, it sort of looks like the government or whoever came up with that calculation was too theoretical without having their foot on the pulse of what exactly happens in some of these areas. And they are all good intentions. We know what is happening. The economy is not good. The government needs money. But we can't come out of where we are by overtaxing ourselves. We'll actually sink deeper if we are not careful. So for me, those are the things that have been playing around in my mind, and I'm telling myself, wow, we need to rethink this and look at it a bit more critically.
You're an economic expert.
Yes.
Maybe you can address that.
Well, I think what they said from the budget yesterday is that they are not taxing insurance per se. It is actually the taxable services. What does that mean?
Yes.
What it means is that if, for example, you had been paid, or maybe, for example, you have your goods, and then there is like fire, already you had claimed the input tax. So what they are saying is that if there is an event that the insurance is going now to pay, already you claimed the input tax. So when they pay you and they are going to pay you the full amount, at that particular time, because you are not supposed to claim twice, that is where now they are taxing. So it is not every other insurance.
Yes.
It is actually the element of the input tax which had already been claimed earlier.
For individuals like some of our friends, lay people who might not really understand what that input what is that?
Let me just give an explanation.
Yes.
In terms of when we are talking about the taxes, there is what we call the output tax.
Yes.
That is what you sell. When you are selling, the element of the VAT is what we call output.
Yes.
When you are purchasing thing, the element of the VAT is what we call the input tax. So what we do, even in terms of paying the KRA, we balance between the sales VAT and the purchase VAT. So that's where now you find you are getting the two. So what we realize is when you are doing the return, you balance. If, for example, you have more in terms of the sales VAT, and you have less in terms of the input, that is purchase VAT, that's when you pay the government some money. But if you have more in terms of the purchases, at that particular time, you are supposed to claim from the government. So those are actually just to do with sales.
So in the case that Alan has raised
Yes,
concern
yes.
over,
Yes.
you know, will insurance, say, health insurance, you lose somebody, the life insurance, those will
No, those
not
are
be
not
affected.
taxable. Those are not taxable services. So the taxable services is actually a service which has the element. You see the VAT from the beginning where there is input and output. That is what we call the taxable services.
Yes.
But any other is just a normal service which is not taxable. So anything that is not taxable, and it is actually, I know they will give at least, they will clarify that point because it is one of the point which had brought a lot of issue.
Yes.
But I know they have tried to clarify it, that it is not every element. It is where you had actually claimed some few inputs, some few VAT you had already claimed through the process of doing the returns.
Okay.
So that is the only area where they are saying you cannot be claiming twice.
You see that now you can rest easy. I hope.
I have the advantage that I have access to Rev, and we can discuss that.
Yes.
And you see, perceptions speak louder than reality.
True.
Such that before this information goes out to the ground, already the mess will have been done. And it's interesting that we are speaking from the platform of leadership within the church.
Yes.
Now you realize the church is the only institution I know that reaches the last mile.
True.
Such that when there is no confluence, there's no partnership, then he can very easily stand in the congregation and say the things that he's saying, of course not with the jargon, but in a language that Mama Mboga will understand. Then Mama Mboga will rest
benefit.
easy.
Yes.
But then how does that happen if then it is
I think
down?
the whole thing is so clouded
It's
within the
talking
political.
down, and of course we are in a political season.
Yes.
We are in Kenya, and Kenya is always in political season, such that how we can be able to divorce politics from issues, that's where I suspect that we need to really come in with other institutions that are not political.
Yes.
Correct.
So that then we can say, okay, you guys go and political in the corner there. We will address the issues, and if there is communication, if there is education, I would be interested in a forum or a platform where ministers are called and told, by the way, this is what is happening. Please talk to your congregations.
Explain.
Talk to your people,
Yes.
and not just ministers, any other person who holds a public office. They should be made to understand. I'm 100% sure that the local chief does not understand what he has said, and that is somebody who
Comes
is
into contact with the
every
people
day.
on a daily basis.
So they will speak what they think, or they will even give misinformation depending on what they had for breakfast. So we must be a bit more intentional with our communication.
True.
What other things stood up, and then we jumped into regulation?
Well, I think overall, I would say that the budget is a bit ambitious. The 3.67 trillion
Yes.
is not an easy task. But I think one of the things that I realized which is standing out in terms of the tax is what we call the amnesty. And I think amnesty is whereby you are given at least a room whereby, like you see, if for example you had an issue, there are some arrears you had not paid for VAT. There is what we call the interest and penalty, which is put on that principal figure. So what the government has said is that within the next 1 year, up to June 2024, if for example you pay the principal amount, all the interest charges and all the penalty which had been put, it's going to be waived, which I think is quite a very encouraging thing, in the sense that you find, for example, you had a debt for like 10,000 shillings.
Yes.
But because it has accrued interest for quite some years, you find that you are now being forced, you are being asked from 10, you are being asked to pay 50,000,
Yes.
which for 40,000 is actually interest and penalty.
Yes.
So what the government has said is, look, we are going now to make sure within this 1 year, if you can be able to clear this principal 10,000, we are going to forget about the 40,000, which I think is quite a
It's
very
going to encourage people
it
to
is
come
yes,
forth and
correct,
actually pay.
yes, yes.
Okay.
And you realize that quite a number of people will be able at least to pay the taxes, and they will make their books to be clean. So I think it has given, this budget has given at least people, taxpayer, quite a good incentive on that line. The other issues that I have realized in terms of the budget, just in general, is that there is a lot in terms of ensuring the local companies, in terms of they are protecting the local companies, in the sense that what they are doing is that if, for example, you find like we have been buying seats, sofa sets,
Yes.
from outside the country.
And we have guys who can be able to do that.
Correct,
Yeah.
correct. So what the government has said, it is actually putting taxes, at least the excise duty,
Yes.
on what you are bringing from out, so that they can actually encourage the people here locally, because we have the skills and we have what it takes. So there are quite a good things, some good things that we are saying, that if the government is actually very serious about what it's talking about,
Yes.
even if it is not going to hit what they have set,
Yes.
because even right now, I think even the financial year 2022-2023, it is unlikely that KRA is going to be able to hit what they had projected,
Yes.
because they had projected 2.2, but right now they are at 1.5, so they are
won't be
likely,
able to
they're likely to get to 1.7. But
it's a good thing when these kind of things are happening. I have never personally understood why we need to import toothpicks. It's just the most ridiculous thing in the world.
Sure, yes, yes.
Yes.
I used to run a carpentry business.
Yes.
I had a workshop, and of course I used to do tenders and all that. But when you remember the first China center along Gong Road, when that thing came, they were selling suits at 2,000 shillings, very
Yes,
high
yes.
quality suits, you know, furniture and all that. That's when I closed, because I knew we are in trouble here. You can't compete with that.
True.
You cannot compete, because they were good, high quality things sold at prices that you can't compete. You can't match the quality. You can't match the prices.
Yeah.
And I knew this business was going down. And I can tell you, free of charge, many people who were in that industry at that particular
Closed
time closed their shop. People who could project. They knew this is not going to work. So many years down the line, maybe 20 or so years, maybe even more, maybe even 30 years down the line, you realize you can't even get a good carpenter to fix anything for you. You will have to import or buy, because that industry was actually
It was
destroyed by
killed.
that. And we are training. We have institutions that we are training artisans, and we are importing things that artisans can do. We are shooting ourselves in the foot, because
True.
we
And
want
actually-
the taxes, and we are not empowering our
We
people.
even as EBN, we believe a lot in empowering the local, tradesmen. One of the things that we've been giving people, locals, is the ability and giving them opportunities to provide for us when it comes to carpentry, like news desks and,
Yes.
and that kind of stuff. But what we've noticed is that the workmanship is lacking.
True.
So what you're saying is very true.
You're in business to make money.
Yes.
So if you need certain investments, a certain capital investment to build things at a certain, standard. So it's an issue of both, and it needs to be cheap, but of good quality.
Yes.
For you to be able to arrive there, then it's a discussion around. It's not the ability of the carpenters. It is the capacity they have.
True.
They don't have the machinery. They don't have access to certain quality of products. There are certain small trinkets that you add to something that gives it value. If you want to chrome something, it would take you going to industrial area, how many people know that you can actually make something and chrome it here in Nairobi, such that then access to certain standards,
information
and all that,
and
becomes an impediment to getting the quality that we would want from the local artisans. So the government should be working, and institutions should be working towards how do we, sometimes you don't throw money at every problem. Sometimes information would give you more than money. Sometimes training would give you more than a loan. Sometimes even access, helping them, putting them in a structure where in other circles it will be called a community of practice. Who does that for carpenters, where they can sit together and say, this is where we can be able to get machinery for ourselves within this area, so that we don't have to go somewhere else to pay or something. So there's need for us to begin looking at how do we build capacity. The training is there. They've been to the tertiary institutions, they've been trained, but then we throw them out of there in the marketplace with nothing.
Go survive.
And it doesn't make sense.
And what is the possibility that the same thing that is happening within the carpentry scene is the same thing that is happening within the religious circles? The conversation that we are having today, where the government is now being forced. The church is ideally supposed to be the conscience of the society.
True.
But right now, the government is coming to try and regulate and help the conscience of the society to be the conscience of society, because we have rogue elements that, the Shakahola thing. It is embarrassing to even have the Mutava Musimi task force coming in to try and help the church to do what the church is supposed to do.
Let me tell you, and this is a very big challenge. And in management, there is something that we say. There are some people who say, don't fix until it is broken, which is quite a bad thing. And I think that is the state that we are with our government today, that they wait for something to be broken, and so that is when they can fix. What we really need is have a preventative. We are preventing some few things from happening. And this is where we are having a problem. Let me say, one, in the first place, why people are not trusting the process of the government is because, like now, as the issues that you have raised, we have a lot of intelligence, and the government has funded those several institutions actually to do their work. The question is, when we are having the cases like Shakahola, what can we really say? Because one, the intelligence, Nyumba Kumi, there is actually all those things which were happening.
If we flip that coin, there are certain, and this I believe comes down to leadership also within the religious circles.
Sure.
Within that area, we have different bodies.
Correct.
Be it the Evangelical Association of Kenya,
yes.
be it the CCK.
Yeah.
I mean, we have quite a number of umbrella bodies that are supposed to be doing what the government is now coming to tell them to do. In Kilifi, there must have been members of this organization who also knew that what was happening here is not right.
Yeah.
How come these institutions, the conscience of the society, was unable to get down there and get things right? We're not regulating the men of God.
It is a typical case of sending a thief to catch a thief.
Oh, what?
And this is why I'm saying it. Let us look at, and you and I know when we come to issues of integrity, issues of corruption. I think if you really wanted a quick sample of corruption in lack of integrity, you'd rush to government, because that's where the biggest sample is. So here we have an institution that does not have a reputation for being upright and forthright.
You're talking about the government?
Yes, on one side. And then we are coming on this other side where the church should also be this center of Paul writing to Timothy says the pillar and ground for all truth in 1 Timothy chapter 3 verse 15. So here you have two institutions that should not even be discussing issues of integrity.
Yes.
We have institutions that should not be discussing issues of leadership and governance. For me, when we are doing leadership development, we normally say the easiest way to develop leaders is plant a church, because leaders will just rise naturally within that context. So here we have institutions that should be modeling. So actually, my biggest question is, what problem are we trying to solve? Because what I'm looking at is we are firefighting. We are trying to manage perceptions. We're trying to manage. We are not solving the problem.
Are you saying there is no problem to be solved?
There is a major problem, but the problem is not in treating the symptoms. The problem is to go back and ask ourselves, where did the rain begin beating us?
So what is the problem? Because before we start talking about solving the problem, we have to diagnose the problem. What is the problem? Now we've come into the faith world. What is the problem that is causing all these things that we're seeing?
Well, I like what Pastor has said.
Yeah.
And one of the thing, and I would request you that I read something here in the
right
Bible,
ahead.
so that at least we see the things that we are talking about are not new. There are things which can happen without a control. And he talked about people being trained for people to understand exactly what is happening. Because in 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 1 to 3, it says, but false prophets also arose among the people, just as there will also be false prophets, false teachers among you, who will secretly introduce destructive heresies, even denying the master who bought them, bringing swift destruction upon themselves. Many will follow their sensuality, because many people want God.
Yes.
So if you, for example, you relate something with God, several people are likely to fall into that trap. And because of them, the way of the truth will be maligned, and their greed, they will exploit you with false words. Their judgment from long ago is not idle, and their destruction is not asleep. You see, some of these things, it is not that they are happening right now.
They started
way back. The question is, what kind of measure? How are we handling what is happening? Because I can tell you, the intelligence was there, especially like what we are talking about. Let me say, this man, like the one that we are talking about, Mackenzie.
Yes.
You know, it is also not a very good thing that we keep on relating him to faith. It is only that this man already from 2019.
Yes.
He even denounced himself. He said that I'm not a pastor any longer. So some of the things that we are having are not more, and I concur with Pastor, it is not more to do with the church. It is actually more to do with the government, because it has the intelligence. This man has been going to the courts, and he is released on a bail of 10,000. Yet the things that we are talking about are great things, mighty things.
If Mackenzie, if Mackenzie was the only character that has come up with, this ridiculous thing, it's only that his was blown. We are now talking to about more than 300 people
who have died. Yeah.
Yes. But it's not just Mackenzie.
It is not.
Within the faith world, there are people who are doing some of the most ridiculous things, and you keep on looking at the Evangelical Association of Kenya. Now, because we are talking about leadership, you look at the leadership or the bodies that have been placed above all these that are supposed to regulate, and you wonder,
I wouldn't want to go to the dogmatic side of that conversation, but what we have is the fact that you have fake elements simply means there's an original somewhere, because you wouldn't have a fake if there was no original. The fact that we are having all these crazy people, it means there are some sober people somewhere, which means if we make that the standard of judging the church until we want to introduce a task force, we are solving the wrong problem. We should come back and ask ourselves, how do we put structures, frameworks, structural interlinks that would make it possible to flag out because it is possible to do that. And then secondly, we also go back to, do we even check our training institutions for ministers? Because we have all sorts of people with all sorts of papers.
The training institute where we are training our ministers.
Yes, and I'm trading very carefully when I go there, because there's a very thin balance between allowing the Holy Spirit to, who is our teacher and counselor and guide, and getting somebody who's been to some school somewhere. And you know, we are having rogue ministers because people are fallen by nature. So somebody who kills people, let's begin with the fact that that person was not even a minister in the beginning.
True.
That person was not even a believer. I mean, why would you take life? It's the most fundamental thing of any faith, not just the Christian faith. Yes. So I'm also hoping that somebody will also put a spot check on the crusades in the city center by young Muslim men who preach some very interesting I don't know which word to use, which is not even Islam. If you go there, I did world religions when I was in college, and I know a bit of Islam. The things they teach there is not Islam. In fact, they take the faith, the Christian faith, and begin to pick scriptures in isolation and make scriptures say what they want to say. Do we have somebody checking that before it becomes a major problem? Because unless we look at the whole blanket of the faith, and by actually, let me say faith institutions, so that then it's not just the Christians. Yes. I have a problem with the fact that it's only the Christians that are put on the spot. I have a problem with that, because we have enough cults in this nation. We have enough people who, and most of the people who are being tagged to the Christian faith are not even Christian.
Sure.
Because how would somebody come up and say he's Jesus or John the Baptist or whatever? That's not a Christian.
Yes.
Because the most fundamental, basic teaching of the faith is that we know who Jesus is. We know who John the Baptist is. That thing is taught in Sunday school. So this person who purports to be John the Baptist is not a Christian. So it is not a Christian faith issue. It is an issue where, by default, human beings are mystical. They look for something that is beyond, outside there. Let us begin understanding that not everybody who mentions Jesus is a Christian, even Jesus said by himself. So that then we don't make a blanket statement that I can't introduce myself somewhere as a pastor because there's a crazy person somewhere in the corner there who is doing nasty things.
So are we suffering what you can call an identity crisis? As now we come back to the faith that we believe in, Christianity, because every other person who, like you talked about, one of those guys who's walking around saying he's John the Baptist, I agree with you, that guy is not a Christian. And even Mackenzie is not a Christian.
Sure.
So are we having an identity crisis in the sense that in the Bible, the Christians were first called Christians in where?
Antioch.
In Antioch.
Yes.
And they were called Christians because they were walking like
With
Jesus
yes,
and behaving like Jesus.
Sure.
But now, every Tom, Dick, and Harry who has an English name and can identify with that is called a Christian. Are we having an identity crisis as a faith? And where do the leaders need to come in and clearly define, this is what Christianity is all about?
Let me say that what we are talking about Christians is not a new thing even in the other circles.
Yes.
Because, and I think it is only that, and I agree with him, it is only that we are actually hyping on one line and not hyping on the other. Let me give you a very, very good example. In the line of medicine,
Yes.
there are some fake doctors.
A lot of quacks.
Quacks, and at the end of the day, you don't say that I will not go to the hospital because they are quack
There
doctors.
is even one who was,
Yes.
there was a whole series
Yes.
on one who was drugging his patients and taking advantage of them.
Sure.
And we don't know what happened to him.
And then also again, you go to law. You find like right now you can be able to go into the internet,
Yes.
and you are able to check. If Fred tells me he is a lawyer,
Yeah, you just
I am
check
able to
there.
go there and check.
Yes.
So I think what we are saying by and large, the problem that we have, if for example you allow human being to operate, there is actually like one example we were given about a dog, that is the Pavlov experiment, whereby a dog, every noon there is a bell that he used to ring.
Yes.
And the dog knew that when the bell rings, there is food for
Yes.
me to eat.
Yes.
Even when there is no food, as long as the bell rings, the dog will salivate because it will know that it is
Yes,
my
food.
time to food. So what happens with human beings? They will always try to test things, and they get accustomed to it. The fact that people are doing whatever they are doing, and there is nobody who is bothered about them. Because even like today, as we are talking about our faith, that identity, it is actually something people, you heard what the Bible is saying about people maligning. It is the people maligning our faith. But I can tell you there are people who are forced from the word go. If there are some structures, and I have seen in other areas, there are some structures which are able to tell you, this is not qualified for this particular thing. And he has said, you know, the issues of faith, we don't want really to go about it much, because there are quite a number of issues which are there, which I doubt whether the government even would understand. Because most of the government people, they don't even understand matters to do with faith.
I find it interesting,
Yes.
Fred, that the people who want to regulate, we also would want to find out what their faith is. Because how then would they treat something that they
don't believe in?
They don't believe in. But that's a story for another day. There's a scripture in Ephesians. Paul says, "Fathers, raise your children in the Lord. Do not provoke them to anger." And it goes, you know, and what I pick up from that scripture is there are two scenarios here. You are either provoking your children to anger, you're raising them in the way of God. There are only two ways of raising children. So it's an issue of formation. It's an issue of we have an angry, crazy generation that we track back, we'll realize it's an issue of formation. The first church is not when somebody goes into the four walls of Redeemed Gospel Church in Buruburu. The first church is the home. How are we parenting our children? How are we raising our children? So that before we even begin fighting with as a minister, I only interact with my members on Sunday. They go to school. What is happening in our schools? They go home. What is happening in their homes? They hang out with their friends. They watch TV. They do all those things. So putting a spotlight on just the religious institution, I'm not mounting a defense. I'm just saying we are not understanding the problem yet. Putting the spotlight on a religious institution that only has 2 hours in a week to influence someone is asking a lot from the religious institutions. We must have a broad-based approach and say, what are our institutions looking like? The church is just a sample of the rot in our society.
So the rot runs through all this problem emanates from home, school, and every interactions that we
without
have.
being explicit.
Just hold on to that thought. I want us to take a short break. Even as I get some of the guys to bring, I love taking water. And if I can get a tea, a cup of tea, that will be really good.
Sure.
Okay, let's take that short break. When we come back, we'll delve into these issues. And also, I basically pick out the quality of leadership then that is being experienced at home. Because we are now blaming the church. But this problem started at home.
Sure.
Leadership at home, leadership in school, leadership in other institutions. Emmanuel, we can take that break right now.
Faith for today is a show to look just look at what is going on in your life and what needs the intervention of God in your life.
Faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the proof of things we do not see.
We are here for you. We are not here only for ourselves.
We are live every Tuesday and Thursday from 9 a.m. We boost your faith.
It is time to revive your faith.
Faith is for now, faith is for today. God has given us the breath of life.
Your Faith Today, live with Reverend Felix Kavoi.
Bwana Yesu asifiwe, watazamaji wa EBN. Kwa majina naitwa Pastor Julius Mutuko, na nataka kukaribisha kwa kipindi ambacho tutakuwa tukisikiliza neno la Mungu kila siku ya Ijumaa na Jumamosi kuanzia saa 3:30 jioni hadi saa 4:30 kila siku kwa lisali moja, na hivyo tukiangazia true worship ama kuabudu halisi, ambapo tukiangalia Biblia kitabu cha Yohana 4:23-24, Yesu alipokuwa akiongea na mwanamke Msamaria alimwambia wakati unakuja ambapo watu watamwabudu Baba katika roho na kweli, kwa maana Baba ni roho ama Mungu ni roho, na yuwatafuta watu kama hao ili wakamwabudu. So John nami tukaweze kujua kuabudu halisi ni nini kwa siku hizo. Karibuni nyote in Jesus name. Asanteni.
Just in case you're joining us, this is the Leadership Challenge Show. My name is Frederick, and you're in the studio with Pastor Alan Kefa and Pastor David Matthew. Both of them are leadership experts and trainers. At the same time, they do their thing in the corporate world. And just before we went for the break, one of the things that we've been talking about is regulating religion. Because there's a task force that have been set up to try and see how faith can be regulated. And as we were going for the break, you had started on something on where the leadership, where we are dropping the ball in as far as leadership is concerned. It starts at home.
Our institutions are failing, and bottom line is you will know the condition of any community based on its spiritual condition. So for us as church leaders, where we know the pain point is that the nation is reflecting the condition of the church. So we must come back and tell ourselves what is it that we need to do so that we become the salt of the world. Because when the world is crazy without flavor, it means salt is absent.
Yeah, true.
When there is darkness, it means the light is switched off. And that's why all these things are happening. So we need to come back and ask ourselves, how do we come back to being the light and the salt of the world? Then we'll be able to help the world. That said, then it means we must come back and look at what is the quality of the leadership. Go to any average school and you'll find that it is the loudest person who is allowed to be the class representative.
It is only the what?
The loudest person. When you go to a PTA meeting, there's somebody who will say so many things, and they will be made the class representative or PTA something. But that's not a measurement, because being loud is just being loud. You can be loud without saying anything.
And that's the same measurement we also.
If you take that, you will see it in the church. It's the loudest person. It's the person who sings the best. That is the leader of the worship team. But that person only has a gift of singing. They don't have a leadership skill. So we confuse gifts with skills. We confuse structures. The fact that you can sing well doesn't qualify you to be the leader of the team. You can lead the songs, but not the team. Leading a team requires other things. It requires competence. It requires chemistry. It requires character. It requires other things beyond the skill. So and that goes in almost every area of society. You will realize even how we pick leaders in schools, it's always on what we see on the surface. So we need to go beyond the surface and have a lens through which we're saying.
Is it because we don't understand what leadership is?
Yeah, well, many people actually don't understand leadership, and I think there are two differences. In Kenya right now, people believe that every politician is a leader, which is actually far from truth. There are some politicians who are just what the pastor is saying. They make noise, they have the money, so they can actually do whatever they want to do. They get even into leadership, not because they have the right qualities of a leader. It is because there is something else that makes them to be propelled to that position. Leadership is actually an influence and a positive influence, which actually looks at improving in terms of the life of the people that you are leading. So you can't be a leader and you are not having a vision for the people that you are leading, because where are you taking them? You'll only be having some people, and that's actually what we say, that leadership does not operate in a vacuum. It operates actually in an environment that the pastor is talking about. You find leadership starts from home. So there is an environment which is created at home. And then whatever we see now coming to the open is actually because of the good attribute that you have learned actually from those settings.
So if we are seeing the kind of madness, so to speak, that we are seeing within, these people who are being called Christians, but they are not, and a couple of, what you can call comedians within who've come and are hiding under the church umbrella, it is because to bring the government to regulate is because these people, maybe the leader, the person who's supposed to act as the leader in training them in the matters, faith at home, failed. Actually,
that's a big point. By the way, let me say that the strongest church is actually that church there at home. This other church, as he has said, it is a 2-hour church. 2-hour church. So it is actually very hard for you to bring out every other thing. And therefore, if we don't have strong families, we'll have a problem. And I will give you a very good example.
Yes.
Right now, and that's why the pastor said, we are actually not addressing the issues, because where did we fail? It is the fact that if you look at right now, where we have a problem, we keep on talking about matter corruption.
Yes.
But do you know corruption starts with you, starts with me, and starts with every other person? But what we have done is that right now, do you know, I was so surprised to hear that in Kenya, several people are saying that we should actually now call corruption the next religion. It has gotten to a point whereby people are actually getting accustomed to the matters corruption.
It's no longer pricking the conscience.
No, it is not.
Yes.
It is actually whereby every other person, for them to get a service to be done, even for them, they are enticing. They want to entice you with something, which is actually a bad thing. And that's why we are saying, when we have a government which is like that, when we have the Kenyan people who are like that, it is actually a very big problem. And you realize that's where you fight, for example, let's say, a politician comes to our church today.
Yes.
Are we going to follow the same program that we follow?
Or
are we going to adjust it so that we are going to please the people? And this is actually where we are saying there is a serious problem. And if this problem is not sorted out, we are only just trying to touch the service. But this service will not be able to address the fundamental issues because the foundation is not light. So what we need to do, let's make the foundation light. And when we have, the other thing is going to start. But without that foundation, it's going to be very difficult.
In the Jewish culture, they had a very interesting program for formation. What used to happen was, when a child is born, they will be brought to the synagogue and prayed for. Then they would be taken back home. And it was the responsibility of the parents, specifically the father, to train this child on the law for 12 years. Then at 12 years, this child...
For 12 years, the father was supposed to train the child in as far as the law is concerned.
Then the child would be presented at the 12th year to the synagogue. and the teachers of the law would sit down with this child and ask them questions that are touching the law.
Oh, that makes sense. So that's the reason why when Jesus was 12,
Yes. He was
went
taken.
yes.
The first time you see him in a synagogue is when he was taken as a baby, and then at 12 years. That was the framework. That was the structure. We have taken it and turned it around. The girl who did not make it to praise and worship becomes the Sunday school teacher. You know, the guy who is looking for something to do in the church, we make them the Sunday school teacher. So we are having people who are giving what they don't have. You know, we are having people teaching what they don't know what to teach. So it was the work of the priest to work, the priests in the synagogue those days, the teachers of the law, to make sure that the fathers were teaching their children. They were teaching their families, such that there was a culture. That's why when Abraham wanted a wife for his son, he says, go to our people. Just by that statement, he meant it's not just my tribe. He was talking about culture. He was talking about, and you see the example in Genesis chapter 24, when the servant asked for water. By default, the culture for the Jews was, if somebody asks you for water, you will give him his workers, his animals, and all that. It's a cultural thing. It's not that it was a quote unquote a miraculous thing that Rebecca gave water. That was not the first time Rebecca was giving water, because that is her culture.
So it was a way of identifying our people.
Whenever you see a stranger, make sure you meet all their needs. Even right now, if you go to the Middle East, even an enemy, if they come to your house, you give them a cup of water. The second cup is negotiable, but the first cup of water must be given. It is a culture that has hospitality ingrained in it. Where am I going with this? It means at formation, this child is taught values. He knows the law, he understands the law. But here we have a faith where the child has been in Sunday school, and the person teaching them Sunday school, her boyfriend is waiting at the door, because probably this person teaching is not in the church, listening to what is being taught, and all that. And it's a whole mess. So we need to bring back the element of education within our communities. People don't have to go through Bible college. Jesus told us a very important thing. He said, make disciples. He didn't say build the church. Building the church is Jesus' responsibility. He says, upon this rock I will build my church. Jesus is building his church. Our responsibility is to build disciples. And disciples means in Sunday school, our teens, who said teens must come and listen to music in church and dance? It is a good thing, and it should be done, because if they don't dance in church, they will dance somewhere else. But is that the only thing we can do with them?
No.
What curriculum do we have? What are we teaching them? What values are we imparting upon them? Nobody supervises them. You know, that's just music and dancing and whatever. And I'm sorry to say, if you look at our youth, they are trying to look as much as the world as possible and still be able to make it to heaven. I have a problem with that, because there should be a distinction. My faith, what happens inside with time begins to show on the outside. It shows in my speech, in how I dress, in how I talk, in how I talk to adults, in how I address the people in my space. That should be visible. So if my child is in the teens ministry and they're disrespectful, they're dressing funny, they're talking funny, I should raise a flag with the pastor and say the Sunday school is not working. The teens ministry is not working.
Is it the Sunday school or you as the father? Because as we said, the values start there.
It is
by the time that child is saying whatever they are saying, they probably started hearing it or saying it at home.
It is both and, sorry. It is both and. Because children are most likely to gravitate towards their friends. So I may teach them values here, and they may be very good actors at home, but they are receiving stuff in church. So if it's what I am part of a board in a school, and normally say, if there's no coming together of the parent and the teacher and the student, this student will not perform well. So we can't have meetings here with the parents and the teachers and the BOM, and we're not involving the students because we don't know their realities. We are just telling them what we think they should be. So there should be a coming together of all these people. Then we agree, you are the project. We have a vantage point. We will help you. We will guide you.
I like what he is saying, and the thing is, in life, you must never create a vacuum. If you did not create a vacuum, in the house, at home. If you create a vacuum, when you get to the other world, then that vacuum is going to be filled by anything. And therefore, that's why we are saying, and that's what he is saying, in terms of those values, they need to be progressive. That they are taught here and they are emphasized at another particular point. I looked at another church. I won't really mention about it, but I was impressed about what they are doing. And it is actually about the young people. The young people are having a book. They are studying, and what they are studying is actually something which is actually putting the right values in them. And you find that every other Saturday, they sit together as young people being guided by someone, and someone is leading them in terms of their values, because we know the challenges that even the young people are having right now. But you know, the thing is, there are some institutions, actually religious institutions, yes, whereby these children will just go. The only thing they will do is what he is saying. They will just stand up there, they dance, and they go home.
Yes.
At the end of the day, the question that we are asking, what is it that these children have gotten from the institution they went to? And you realize, you ask a child, what did you learn today? And they tell us, my teacher's name is Ruben, or anything like that. But they are not really telling you anything much, because there was nothing that was being taught of them. And therefore, that's where we are having a problem, because we don't have a program for our children. So at home, the parents might be doing a lot, but you see, here out in the world, who cares about the other child? It is not like long time ago where you used to say a child belongs to the society.
Now, yeah.
Right now, you just go and prink my child. You'll find me just coming here, and you'll be taken to court. Why have you touched my child? And you see, that's where we are saying the society that we are in is actually a busy society, which doesn't really care about what happens. And therefore, if we are not intentional, and we have a program to bringing up people at every stage, yes, that is childhood, adulthood, and even at our ages, yes, we need to be taught, a proper taught in terms of the program. Why you are finding that people can go to Shakahola? Some of the people who went there are people who loved God.
Yes.
But you see, they lacked in terms of teaching, the right teachings. And they could not be able to differentiate the truth and the lies. And that is where we are having a bit of a problem, because we are just assuming that people are just growing and they are becoming okay the way they are.
We assume that they're getting the right kind of
Sure.
without testing. I like what you had said. The father would be, the child will be taken to the synagogue, dedicated, and then handed over to the father. For 12 years, the father was supposed to train, and then afterwards take the same child to the temple, so that now the priest can test the knowledge of this child.
Correct.
In as far as they found. So we don't have a way of testing.
The statement that says the father is in the son comes from that concept, where the father passes knowledge to this child, and it is put on a test. So we know the kind of parent they are by what we see in their children. If you go back to the 80s,
that's such a powerful statement. I mean, if I see your child, then one look at the child and the behavior and the values, and you can be able to tell what kind of a father.
It reflects on. That's why when Jesus spoke, there are ladies who said, "Blessed be the breast of the woman who gave this child suck." It was not about the child; it was about the investment that was put in this child. I wanted to show you a sample. In the 80s, 90s, and even early 2000s, there were organizations in colleges and schools. Beyond CU, there was this network of Christian Union fellowships.
Yes.
And the pastors, quote unquote, were actually teachers of those fellowships. In Christian unions, the teachers would actually impart the faith to the students. If you go to college, there were institutions like Focus, and I've interacted with Focus a lot, and Focus used even to bring out commentaries of Bible students. Students would do a study of Bible, of books, and do commentaries. There was Weso, and other institutions where students from a certain region would come together and go to their home regions and do crusades and birth ministries. Yes. That brings us back to, if we are not seeing those, if those institutions collapsed, then it means the seed will always be as good as the harvest. The entry behavior when students come to school, what they come into the school with, will determine how they come out of the school. So those structures that were there, and they were informal structures, they were not even part of the, it's just that we know about those institutions and because we used to interact with them. The fact that those institutions are not there, it is telling us something about the rot in our society.
They literally just
I've not heard of Focus for a while. I don't know if it's still there. I've not heard of the one for the Christian Fellowship. What is it called? I forget the name. But those are institutions that were very powerful. Growing up as a minister, I was a youth pastor, and almost every weekend I was preaching in a weekend challenge. I have never heard of a weekend challenge for the longest time.
In schools.
In schools. So the education system has become so loaded with information, and there is no formation. We are just feeding our children with information, but we're not allowing them to form their character. It's like I said, it's a whole mess that we are in. We can't just say, let's deal with this and leave this other one. We'll actually make it worse, because the fact that there are fake preachers, it means there's some preachers who are doing a good job. There's some believers who are doing, and they don't have the structures. I'm fond of giving this example. Right now, if you go to Kariobangi or Madare or somewhere, you'll find a minister there who has been there for the last 20 years, and the church has never grown beyond 20 or 30. This person, probably because they are not part of an umbrella body, with this regulation that will come, they may not even exist any longer. Yet this is somebody who has raised families. He has raised generations. He's not there for the pay. He's not there for the money. He's passionate about the faith. He's discipling a small group. That is the Jesus model. Because Jesus, actually his church was the 12. The crowds were just coming for the food. So we must go back to that model where the bigger we grow, the smaller we must grow.
The bigger we grow, the smaller
we must grow. And that's why the family becomes an important unit. Then when you have a unit of families, it becomes another unit. And that's what now a local community is. Again, we go back to the Bible. People never used to go to the temple. People used to go to synagogues. Synagogues were spaces smaller than this, because it was within people from within that area would come to the synagogue. Then once a year or twice a year, they would go to the temple for feasts and for major events. But they would always have their fellowships in synagogues, at the homes and in the synagogues, at the homes and in the synagogues. This big church is a great thing for publicity, for visibility, but it's not great for discipleship, and that's why we are having the things that we're having. So we must have a balance between big church, small church. We'll be able to do what needs to be done.
So now, since the government has come in, set up a task force, what is supposed to happen? What is supposed to happen, either with this task force or with what you can call the church leadership, so that we are not being regulated by the state, but at the same time we are behaving like Christ?
You see, the thing is, we must accept one thing, that there must be an umbrella. The issue is, it doesn't have to be driven by the government. But I feel there is some way that we really need also, because you see, we also need to be careful about the gospel that is being preached, because we are also mindful about the souls, and we don't want to lose people through the false prophets and people who are not really preaching Christ. So if you look at many organizations, actually in very many, if you find even the Matatus, they have actually their own organization, the umbrella organizations, whereby the rules, bylaws are set, that there are some few things that you cannot do. If you do those things, you are actually blacklisted from that community.
And even that circle.
Yes, from that circle. So what we are saying is that in terms of, we know the right values in terms of the religion. What is it that stands out in terms of like the way you talked about Christ. People being called Christians because of who? They were actually moving with Christ. And what we are saying at the end of the day, there are some few fundamental structures which we really need to have. Because today, let me ask you, if you go and start a church there, which authority do I have to come and tell you shut this church? Yeah. You know, you realize that I may not have that authority because there are no bylaws, there are no structures which really tells me that if someone is doing one of these three things, then that person is not doing the right thing.
So should we give teeth and authority to some of these umbrella bodies? Like I keep on going back. The Catholics have their what you can call the umbrella body that governs. The evangelicals have their own. The mainstream churches have their own. So and I think if you allow me, I think it is within the evangelicals that we have a lot of wrongness, so to speak. So should these bodies be given teeth so that if you set up a church, you have to fall within an umbrella?
In my opinion is that we need at least to also, you know, there must be laws, rules and regulations. Yes. Because apart from being in church, if for example today I go and steal something, the Kenyan's law, and that's why you find even Kenya has a constitution which is supreme. There is at least an authority which is above you. But you find there are some ministries right now, there is no authority. It is someone who wakes up.
They don't answer to anyone.
They don't answer to anyone, which is actually a dangerous position. And if we are not careful, where people are not accountable for anything, you may find that everybody is just like today. You know what is happening? Most of the people, and it is a very sad affair, is that people, he has explained about what the structure in terms of Jesus' ministry. But today it is more of a competition. How many cars can I drive? What kind of a church do I have? You know, it is impression.
About Christ.
Even
my director Emmanuel is telling me my time is up. So I think we...
Let me close. Let me make my closing with this.
Yes.
Let us not forget that Kenya is a culture of commissions. Look at commissions that will set up another commission for the other commission. So we forget that we have laws, we have the constitutions, we have structures, and anybody who kills anybody is criminal. You don't need a commission you need to take that person to court, not through a commission. Anybody who steals needs to be taken to court. Yesterday I was walking along Nile Road and I counted 4 churches back to back. And
just Nile Road.
Nothing else is there. A garbage dump and then 4 churches back to back. And
4 different churches.
Yes, and that is not land that needs to be used for church because it's behind an estate. That is against the law. Do you need a commission for that? You don't need a commission for that. So we are like I said, we don't understand the problem we are solving. There's a very thin line between a moral issue and a spiritual issue. Moral issues are actually addressed by the law. So there is a framework within the law to address the moral issues. Then the umbrella bodies that are there, the Evangelical Alliance of Kenya and other, they address the spiritual issues because you must be, but the faith in and by itself does not exist in isolation. Yes. We are all part of a larger body, so you can't be somewhere who is rogue outside there without being part of a larger body. And within that there's the capacity, the ability, the networks to prosecute whatever issue that is there.
Okay.
So you do not, I'm sorry to say, need another commission to solve a problem that we already know that there is a law, there is the legal framework to deal with moral issues, and there is a spiritual framework to deal with the spiritual issues. People who have broken the law, somebody who has killed people should just be taken to court and prosecuted. Okay. Somebody who steals should just be taken to court and prosecuted.
Well, I think by and large, as a body of Christ, we need law and order. That we must do the things which are actually reflecting Christ. If we find someone is not doing the things that reflect Christ, I would say, let the law take its course. Because at the end of the day, there are some few people who are maligning the name of the body of Christ, and therefore we need to be very careful. And that's what you are talking about. Let's give authority to institutions that has been formed to be able to come and say, Fred, you are not on the right track. And with that authority, you can say, just like the way they can close a farmer, a chemist, it is the same way we are saying, let there be an authority, that there is a counting person who can say, no, this is not going to continue. Yes, correct.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. I know Pastor Alan is headed for a burial. Please give our condolences to the families and thank them for allowing you to come and share with us your wisdom.
Asante.
Okie doke. It's about that time. We got to bring down the curtains on the show. Thank you very much for participating in the show. Question is, should the government regulate the church? Think about it. Have yourself a great day. We got great programs coming in on EBN, so stick here. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
You too.